Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy M.K.S here, back with another video, and welcome to part one of who to me personally supports Celtic. As Celtic were playing earlier today and had a good victory actually, 3-0, 3 points and 3 goals most importantly. I didn't get to watch the game, but I heard the commentary live on a channel called, I think it's C.S.C.s or something like that. Don't know how to pronounce it, but I really like the channel. Please check it out and subscribe to it if you'd be so kind. Spelled C.A.K.S.A. Sorry, C.A.K.S. God's sake, C.A.K.A.Z.I.A.N. I think, but I think he's pretty cool anyway. Has a great beard as well. But yeah, and that's probably part of what makes him cool. But and he has a lot better accent than me as well. I think it's Scottish accent. So anyway, I listened to the game there, so rather than I didn't obviously get to watch it. For once, I don't have a cup of tea because this mug is empty, but it's green like Celtic, so I'm going to make a cup of tea after part one. But anyway, I'll try and crack on, as I often say. I know I do waffle, but I hope people out there enjoy it, enjoy my waffling, and I'd love to know what you think as ever. But yeah, good victory for Celtic, 3-0, a clean sheet, 3 points, obviously 3 goals from 3 points. I heard that there was a really reckless challenge on the keeper, Joe Hart, so I hope Joe Hart's all right. I hope he's not too badly injured. From a personal point of view, away from football, really, because I don't really want people to be injured. According to Ryan118, who I listened to as well after the game, another Celtic channel I hope you'll check out and subscribe to. I hope Celtic fans will support each other on social media, basically, including on YouTube. For personal reasons as well. Yeah, he said that Joe Hart apparently was lucky not to. Well, he didn't say apparently, but he claimed that Joe Hart was lucky not to lose an eye, and it sounded like it was quite a bad knock. I think that would feel really. It's awful to think of someone losing an eye playing football. I hope to God that never happens to anyone, even my worst enemy. But anyway, yeah. So Celtic, one of my favourite teams, played today, so I thought I would make a video on who I would love to support Celtic, and I suppose as part of that, like what supporters clubs and academies I would love to see. I was thinking it's really important after the victory over our nearest and dearest rivals, I say sarcastically. I thought it was really important to carry on the momentum and win this game. Although from a neutral's point of view, it would probably been good to see someone else win. But I, obviously, as a Celtic fan, and I'm sure my fellow Celts don't really want to see us lose games. I suppose outside of the two main teams, Celtic and Rangers, another team hasn't won since 83, 85 or something. So when I was about 3. So anyway, here are some of the groups I say that I would love for Celtic to have, like academies in and sports clubs in and whatnot. So here goes. So number 1. Obviously, whoever wants to support Celtic and like wherever there already are academies and sports clubs, I would love to see the club continue with those, obviously, and to expand from there. Number two, as I say, expanding from however many sports clubs and academies we have around the world. I would love to see the best possible scouting team. I wonder if we have a good enough scouting team. I fear that Celtic probably could have a better scouting team to scout to make sure we have better players, the best possible players, and for the club, obviously for the club's finances, it can't compete with like EPL teams or whatnot. For those who might not know, EPL stands for English Premier League, but for clubs who have more money than Celtic, but in Scotland, the club should be able to have the best possible players for the Scottish level, basically. As we have a higher budget, I believe, than any other Scottish team, thankfully. But I'd love to see the club get to also to look at how it can improve, how it can learn to attract more finances, so it can buy players, can develop the academies and sports clubs and things like that all around the world. So I hope they will learn as much as they can about how to market the club to attract more fans from across Africa, Asia, and the rest of the world, and also including the Americas and all over the world, and also how it can get academies. Maybe look at ways they can learn to spot like how to make academies around the world in places where we're likely to produce great players. I hope to come to that point in more details. Number three, attracting more funding, and I think it'd be cool if the club money from like national and local politicians and councillors and whatnot, so the club could attract investment and get money from like the national lottery funding, like funding for good causes and things like that. So with the I often talk about like with the good work the club does, and also the fact that Glasgow is quite a deprived area. Obviously, that's where Celtic is based. So if they could get the funding, hopefully they could benefit people in Glasgow and maybe even across Scotland and in deprived areas around the world, especially in Glasgow itself. So obviously, hopefully that will be an incentive for the SNP and others, the local and national politicians and councillors, and also the lottery for good funding and things like that. So getting funding from the lottery and all sorts of different sources to give young people opportunities to play football and learn their diets, how to stay fit and things like which would be good for like cutting back on crime in the NHS, obviously the National Health Service money and things like that, and that kind of thing. One of the dilemmas I have is like, as a libertarian, I know Celtic is quite left wing and they have quite libertarian, not libertarian, they have socialist or communist views. And one of the things I disagree with a lot of the fans have in terms of talking about who would love to support the club. I think that like one thing I disagree with is that the fans say Tories not welcome, Conservatives or Tories or people on the right are not welcome, and I assume that would mean libertarians, because libertarians are like fiscally conservative. So in that regard, we're a bit like Conservatives or Tories or whatever. So I disagree with that. I think the club, as it says, it's a club open for all, but some of the fans say like Tories not welcome. Tories is actually apparently a Scottish word for conservative, and it means robber or something like that in English. But it's like the Scots have their own language as well. But anywho, I think that it should be welcoming for libertarians like myself. As a libertarian myself, I'm probably one of the few, if not the only, libertarian supporter of Celtic. I support them for different reasons. I'm not a socialist or a communist or whatever. I support them for anti-imperial reasons, basically. But yeah, I think it should be welcoming to people who are more fiscally conservative, Tory, libertarians especially, and that kind of thing. I suppose really when Ireland was colonised by the UK, I mention Ireland obviously because Celtic has roots in Ireland. When the UK colonised countries like Ireland, they lost their liberty. So I think there is a good libertarian argument for supporting Celtic. Number four, I'd love for the club to stand for like pacifism, anti-violence. Controversially, I don't believe we should join the military. I don't like to hear of Celtic supporters joining the military or supporting any militaries. I disagree with like the IRA chants as well. That sometimes but I'd love for the club to come out and distance themselves from any forms of violence, and dare I say like support pacifism, conscientious objection, and things like that. And maybe pacifists, conscientious objectors, and that kind of thing can support Celtic in the future. People who are anti-war and that kind of thing. I know Celtic supports Palestine. Generally speaking, almost all Celtic fans I think supports Palestine. I like to be neutral, but so I say almost all. Just like I said, I'm probably the only libertarian and person who tries to be neutral as well who supports Celtic. But as I often asked in the past, like, am I the only non-Catholic teetotaler who supports Celtic because of the Irish roots? Obviously, Irish do tend to like to drink, but I'm sure I'm not the only teetotaler. And I know the club has fans who are Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, I'm sure, and from all different faiths. But yeah, I'd love to see how the club can attract more investment, which could mean more academies and sports clubs. And I'm sure there was a point I was going to say, and I've just remembered it. I would love for people from Mediterranean and Mediterranean and Middle Eastern, and also transcontinental, especially Eurasian nations, to support Celtic, and for the club to have academies maybe in those countries and that kind of thing. Number five, also from Malaysia, India, Indonesia, South Africa and Singapore and other parts of Africa and Asia, and again all around the world. One of the dilemmas I have is like, although I support these countries, or try to support these countries, and I wish them well, Malaysia especially, and especially Malaysia, India, Indonesia, South Africa, and Singapore, and the rest of Africa and Asia, and I suppose the rest of the world, really, Latin American countries and that kind of thing. It's difficult to see whether there will be good players from Malaysia, India, Indonesia, South Africa, and Singapore, and places like that, because and other parts of Asia, like say China or places like that, because I know the club's had quite a few players from Japan, but I don't think we should have players just because they're from those places. But although it's great to have fans from around the world, I think we should pick the best players, not because of where they're from. But why I say that's a dilemma is because having academies in those countries could be a risk. Like if it costs money to develop those academies, so I wonder if it is a price the club would want to take, and also the fans would want the club to take, because the club's known for penny pinching. They're infamous for penny pinching, like having 70 million in the bank but not really spending too much of it. So I think if they don't want to spend that money on players, then I wonder if it would be worth spending that money on academies. Although academy players are like future assets, because if they play for the club, hopefully they'll play for the club and even eventually be sold on. Preferably they'll do both, play for the club and be sold on. But even if the club could just sell them on, even if I suppose it's another thing Celtic's known for is not like developing too many young players, local players or whatever. So if they don't spend money on buying players, I wonder if the fans would. I mean, I suppose with Celtic, just like with Rangers, to be fair, success is expected like quite quickly, so they won't really want what they call project players who will take 5 to 10 years to develop, or possibly even longer. So it is a bit of a dilemma. I'd love to know what Celtic fans think about that. But I mean, if with the right investment and the right coaching and things like that, maybe Celtic could help those nations to develop those players. Number 6. Also, I'd love to see as much investment as possible for Italian teams like Torino and others, all possible Italian teams really, and Celtic as well. And a partnership I haven't talked about with Italian football and Celtic. I know there already are the Italian Celts, but I'd love to see, as I'm a bit biased as a fan of Italian football as well, I'd love to see Celtic having supporters clubs and academies, even more sports clubs, and certainly a lot more academies in Italy as well. So hopefully they can help to practice. I'd love for them to train at youth level as well together. Number 7, although as I say, it is a bit of a risk, and I'd love to know, as I say, read from other fans and hear from other fans, like as to where other Celtic fans think we should have academies. Really, supporters clubs, I'm sure, would be welcome in any country, because the more supporters there are, the more people buying kits and investing in the club. Even if like the club gives away like free footballs and things like that, football kits or things like that, and every now and then they could be lost leading products. So in the longer term, having more fans could increase the brand value of the club. I'd love to see as many investors and shareholders and that kind of thing as possible. But even just selling kits, even if we didn't change even if no one came in to buy Celtic, it would still be more money for the club. I think maybe I'm being naive on it, but I'm sure having more fans around the world does help financially, at least. And also I would love to network or collaborate with fellow Celtic fans, like talking together on YouTube in 2024. I'm hoping as soon as possible. I was hoping to do so around Christmas, but I would love for as soon as possible for, like, however you pronounce the channel name, like Kazian, whatever his name is in real life, Ryan118, a Celtic State of Mind, Axon for short, and others, the Boise Bus, Thoughts on the Hoops, Come on the Hoop Celtic, and other channels, all possible Celtic related content creators, to sort of collaborate together, like on a split screen, and talk together on Zoom and things like that, and like record that for YouTube. I think that would be pretty cool. Number 8, I think we call it POC, people of colour. I know it's a controversial term, so please forgive me for those who might not like that term. Basically, what I mean by that is, like, controversially, I would say non-white people, if you like, but Black, Asian, mixed race, and Native American, Latino, Hispanic people, and possibly even Jewish people around the world, and people of all different race and religion. I'd say probably anyone who's a non-WASP, who's not either white, who's not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. In my opinion, they should support Celtic. Obviously, I'm a bit biased. And also, I almost forgot the Celtic countries, as I would call them, the alliterative effect. Most people call them, quote unquote, normal people call them Celtic nations, but I would call them Celtic countries. So I forget what they are. I know Ireland is one. I think Scotland is one. Wales is another. I think Cornwall is another. I think even Brittany and France. And there's one or two others I can't remember. But the 8 Celtic countries, I would love for people from those countries to support Celtic. Maybe even those who are not even into football could get into football and Celtic, given the name Celtic as well, so that they could. Celtic could be representatives for the Celtic countries as well. And again, it would be great to have like sports clubs and even academies maybe in those areas and countries and places. So it could help to develop football in the 8 Celtic countries. And again, Celtic could be representatives of the 8 Celtic countries. Number 9, I'd love to see lots of different groups like poets, artists, writers, architects, designers, business people, and whatnot, politicians and whatnot for Celtic. There could be like different, like say, like there could be different groups like poets for Celtic, artists for Celtic, writers for Celtic, and so on and so forth. And number 10, again, I think it's really important to develop young players who are a potential asset for the future. And I'd love to ask again any Celtic fans out there, like, where would you like to see the club have academies and or even sports clubs? In the case of that, I'm sure you'd love to see them all over the world, but academies are a bit of a risk, as I say, because I don't think we should play players just because, let's say, play players just because they're from Malaysia or India or China or anywhere else like that. Just because they're from Asia or Africa, and we want to develop a market in those countries. If they're not good enough, I think they should only play if they're good enough, whatever their background is. So I think it does depend if we think those countries can develop, but maybe like taking a risk like that 70 million in the bank, maybe taking £1 million out and helping to develop football in India, and or even working with people in India who want to develop football in India, China, places like that. Again, Malaysia, Singapore, and places like that, and look at if we can develop not only sports clubs but academies in those countries, and especially sports clubs, which would be hopefully a net benefit, almost certainly. Anyway, I'm going to stop waffling, and I'd love to know what you think as ever. Peace and love. I'm out.